Hello everyone. Today we're talking with Marko Schilde. He is a CTO in Comtravo. It is a big company providing different booking services. They have a lot of different ways to do that. They use a lot of technologies, and it's super interesting to speak with CTO of such a company. How as I know, you, Marko, work already from the beginning with Comtravo.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was essentially the first tech hire. So when I joined, there was pretty much just a garage full of happy students and business people who were faking the product. And essentially, when I joined, my mandate was to build the foundation behind this facade. So to build proper services, proper tech products, and 4.5 years later, here we are.
So are you a co-founder of this company?
Yes. So I'm one of the co-founders. We started out with 4 co-founders, so 2 tech guys, 2 business or 2 founders with a business background, and yes.
And how actually have you met those guys? How were you get acquainted?
Well, like how everybody meets everyone, it was a complete accident and a random thing. So I quit my other company and I was thinking what to do with my life, and was looking forward to a few months of downtime. And then I met Michael, who's our CEO and essentially the original founder. And he was looking for a CTO. He pinged a friend of mine and I got the introduction, and it sounded like a solid idea. And for me, especially important was that they were already testing a prototype. So it was not a random thing where you lock yourself in a room and 2 years later you build a product and see whether there's market fit. But they had actual customers. They just had a tech problem to serve them at scale and efficiently.
I see. And where, by the way, have you gotten your technical background? Have you worked in different companies as a developer?
How far back should I go? So essentially, I'm a computer kid, a kid of the 90s. So I started with Pascal and then played around. At some point, the internet became a thing, and I was building websites and CGI scripts. Then I studied computer science. At some point, I discovered you can actually earn money with all of this. So I went into first consulting and then freelancing. And then around 2010, also Berlin became a thing. So before this was really like, now it's hard to imagine. Now it's one of the startup hubs in Europe, but back then it was really nothing. It was hard to get a job here, and everybody was just a tourist in the city. But around 2010, I joined the Berlin startup community. So I moved here and started working in mobile advertising, which I worked in various companies. I think the most interesting in this was TradeMob, where I somehow was also a random occurrence. They had a bigger finance round. I joined them as a freelancer. And somehow then they ran into all kinds of interesting challenges. And I don't know, I found myself then as the VP of engineering with multiple teams that I built up. And 4 years later, here we are.
So basically, this is not kind of surprising stories where you woke up and one day you're a founder of an organization.
The thing is, there's nobody. I keep telling this also my engineers. There's there's no CTO diploma that you get or a founder diploma. You somehow need to take the initiative and do it. And often it's you need to it's like in private life when nobody hands you a wife at the beginning of your career, and same there, or a family, and you have to take the initiative. You go out, you take the opportunity when there's trouble in some company, and you organize it and bring it forward.
So it took something like 7 years or more for you to learn all these technologies to go through this way from the, I don't know, junior developer to VP of engineering or even more.
Yeah, this was a longer track. I mean, it's also not straightforward where you just take one step and next step and next step. Because from looking back from CTO or VP engineering perspective, developing or writing code is just one small puzzle piece. One bigger puzzle piece is solution patterns, so things that work. So like a service-oriented architecture or RESTful services, how to keep state, how to propagate events, how to process, how to do stream processing. So all kinds of architectural concerns that you find in all the companies in your career. And then, of course, the interesting other part is how to manage or how to build up teams and how to make them work efficiently. It's one of the hardest parts, where there's also a lot of surprising amount of trial and error in there.
So basically, soft skills are almost the most important thing for you currently.
They're definitely the hardest thing to learn, because this is what's usually not taught in computer science study, or where nobody takes you aside and tells you, okay, this situation, there's also no flow chart that you just follow to have a happy and productive team. And these are things where if you're lucky, you find a mentor early on. So a senior person doesn't have to be with computer background, can be from HR or product or whoever who you trust. But it's also where you have to bring in your personal experience, your personal style. Not everything is. I mean, you can, for example, you can watch how role models in the industry lead their teams, how they do talks, how they go to conferences and present. But you can't take this one-to-one and apply it to yourself. You have to apply it, or you have to take the things that work and digest it and develop and improve yourself. Yeah, and also a lot of things depend on what kind of developers you end up with, or how your team is composed, where the actual problems are, what personalities you have. And more often than not, it's very easy to write code and to build a highly scalable system that has data processing layers and pipelines that's easy to develop on, that has good tests, good technologies, is maintainable. But really the hard part is bringing the culture into the team and making or keeping humans, developers, intrinsically motivated, so that 5 guys working together is more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because it's really difficult to manage even, I don't know, 3 or couple of guys, and when you have a lot of team members, it's really a problem. By the way, how much of people now in your team, and how much was when you were in TradeMob?
Well, by now we have a relatively big setup. I mean, big depending on which perspective you look at it from, but we're about 50 people here in the engineering/product/data science department. Obviously organized into multiple teams, and we started out with really small setup. So when the company was founded, we started building on one team. So 5, 6 guys that were able to work together as efficiently as possible, because that's also the big trade-off between a bigger organization and a small organization is stability versus throughput. And obviously, in the early stages of career, of a company, you care about throughput. So there were times when you merged 5 features per day. This is, of course, very hard to do with multiple teams and very hard to scale up. But this is when you benefit from a team of strong, motivated, aligned developers, where you have a very easy communication, very easy translation step from company vision, from company what the business needs or what the company needs to solve their problem, to code and production. And then the trick is the hard problem is to scale this up, to keep this efficiency across multiple teams. There's some parts that you can solve with patterns. This is where typical organizational patterns come into play, like having a product team, having a infrastructure team, having a dedicated BI team. So removing inherent complexity by specialized teams. I mean, on a bigger scale, companies do this when they have a HR team or finance team or sales team. It's all one thing, and then you start specializing this and defining also the interface between these different ambassadors of these aspects. The hard part is, of course, then keeping developers productive and motivated across multiple teams. And this is also where everybody struggles, where we also struggle to, because you have to trade off. So this is exactly what you want. So we have multiple teams that are more resilient to individuals leaving. But by building up this stable setup, you also remove individuals more layers. You put more distance between the individual developer to what the company needs. And it's much harder for a developer to sit in the night and change, the design of the website. In the early days, everybody praises you. In the later days, everybody yells at you. And the hard part is to find the right balance, what the company also needs for this, for the setup in its life stage in maturity. Because now, of course, we're a company that has 150 people, that has multiple million euro revenue per month. So it's also a bigger organization setup. So of course, also from CTO perspective, the trade-offs change, or the goals change. So in the early days, as I said, you push out features, the more the better, while trying to seed the stable patterns that are scalable from an architectural perspective, from a software craftsmanship perspective. But nowadays you have other concerns like security, or we need to be able to be audited. We need to be ideally not lose customer data. We need to, care about translating also business needs into, or strategic needs into road items that we can work on. And all these are multi-dimensional trade-offs that are now my daily business as a CTO.
I see. And can you share some life hacks, how, or maybe growth hacks, how to organize actually such teams? Because I see it actually a problem really when people, especially if you have some remote team, it's a problem.
Yeah, to be honest, so far we do not have a remote team, and it was also a conscious decision to not do this initially. I mean, at some point we are aware that it's impossible to put everybody into one building. Same way it's impossible to put everybody in one room. I mean, you have this scaling trajectory as a company. At first, everybody sits around one table, then you have multiple rooms. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Then and so on. So the communication becomes harder, and I mean, there's no hack. There's nothing, no silver bullet where you say, oh, if I follow this flow chart, we have a successful company. And more often than not, the things that help the most are the most obvious things. So one thing that's, for example, important to me is that everybody understands, everybody in my team, in my teams, understands how they contribute to the company's success or to the company's next necessary things. It's also very hard to find the right messaging, because also, of course, the messaging changes, or is a function of the size of the company. So when you're very small, you talk openly, you use strong language, you are sometimes politically incorrect, and this works because you drink beer together after work. You're just one unit. But the bigger the company becomes, the more of a representative of the company you also get, also as a CTO. And then the challenge is to still keep this sense of urgency. This guys, we are not here to fill some awkward business metric, but this is how we contribute to the sales numbers. This is how we contribute to production stability. This is where we are good. This is where we're not good. This is the focal point. And of course, there are typical frameworks that encourage this. For example, we are using OKR. Now everybody's just doing OKR. Same way everybody's doing Scrum. And the important differentiator is that you can't just read a book and do this. You can't just do what Elon Musk does or whatever role model claims they're doing, and then apply it stupidly, because there you will fail. But the important part is to dissect what you want to encourage, so also what the framework tries to push towards, and then apply this where it's strong at, and using the right tools to get the outcome that you want to encourage. For example, we thought long, or we have constant discussions also on a different level, whether to use Scrum or Kanban or Waterfall or different models or extreme programming or whatever. In the end, everybody does. What was the proper term I read for this is wild agile. So a pragmatic approach that every team in the end takes. And the important part is as a tech or as an engineering manager or a tech leader to slightly nudge the team in a direction where it's more successful in reaching the goals that you want to emphasize. For example, in the early days, we optimized for throughput of the team. So this is where Kanban was an optimal way. So everybody was properly organized. We didn't have that many discussion points. Essentially, junior developer to engineering manager could, in the middle of the night, tell me what were the company goals. And this is where you just give as many tasks and optimize for feature throughput, as I said. Now, with a slightly bigger organization, we're switching, for example, to Scrum, because it's becoming more important that other departments in the company are able to anticipate what you are actually going to deliver and are able to go out to the customers and promise them features by the end of the quarter, which means you start optimizing not as much for throughput. So throughput I gain now through more developers and more functioning teams, but by having a higher predictability and a higher likelihood of achieving roadmap items. And sorry, it sounds boring, but in the end, this is also what differentiates the magic of a startup to bigger organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with, by the way, this type of tasks when, I don't know, everybody somehow meets routine tasks? What do you do? What do your developers think about that? Because they always want to grow, and it's not always possible.
Yeah, this is definitely also one of the constant discussion items, because developers want to deliver features. They're happy when or also it's very hard for a company culturally to be in an all hands or in a town hall meeting and say, yeah, we refactored or we upgraded the Mongo version or something like this. Nobody will celebrate this. And I mean, one pattern is to have a strong engineering culture that definitely values this. As we have similar storytelling than features, you need to be able to explain why you want certain things, why you need to upgrade the logging system, why you need to refactor the code base. It's definitely also an emerging pattern of a healthy team. So strong senior developers should know why you upgrade certain parts, why you fix certain technical debt. So for me, for example, also I put this in the development expectation for my software engineers, that up above a certain level, they need to start also pushing for their own technical agenda. They're not just ticket pushers. They're not just guys who take one thing and then deliver this to the next. This part I can outsource. Then I go to India and hire other developers. But people who are the expensive developers who I try to bring into our Berlin office and align with our company goals and company values, I expect them to also care about not just the shiny outside, but the foundations of the system. And I know I can't expect this from the I don't know, from investors, or I know I can't expect this from sales guys, but the engineers should care about this. Otherwise, they're in the wrong company.
Yeah, I see. So you don't hire actually junior developers. You try to find some really smart guys, senior guys.
I mean, we do hire juniors, but for me, this being a smart guy and being a junior or senior are different things. So definitely one big one big metric that we or one big thing that we interview for is, does somebody care about their craft? So it's easier to take a Python course and then call yourself a developer, but and it's also easy to go through a computer science degree without having any real insights into what is actually programming, unfortunately. But there are smart, motivated developers out there who care what they're doing, who go, and usually one pattern, for example, or one aspect that we interview for is, are they able to look to break the abstraction, to look behind what's going on inside the programming language? How does a compiler work? How do data structures work? What are the difference between certain trade-offs, for example, REST versus RPC? And the answer is not check, and this is why you do one thing or why the other, but like everything in life, it's about trade-offs, it's about reasoning. And yeah, so to answer your question, we definitely do hire junior developers, but we care about hiring the smart ones who are ambitious and who know, in our case, for example, we use Node.js, who know how the event loop works, or at least the basis of this, design patterns, and so on. Yeah.
And how long usually in average it may take to grow from junior to senior developer? It's actually, we always arguing about it. I'm interested in your opinion.
Well, longer than it takes, longer than many think. So I always have these discussions. So Berlin is a hot city with everybody with, I don't know, 1 or 2 years experience is able to sell himself already as a senior developer. And from technical aspect, this is often already true. So the smart, ambitious guys are ready for their first promotion very quickly, because it's often what's separating a junior from mid-level engineer is production-ready patterns. like how do you do testing? How do you care about design patterns in a bigger production code base? These are things that are usually not taught in academia, so in your computer science degree, and that are also harder to gain through personal projects. So yeah, you care about test coverage, but you only see why you care about test coverage when you need to apply a complex patch on a legacy complex code base. This is when you realize, this is why design patterns are actually useful. And that's usually the step from junior to mid-level. But then the next steps are, in my opinion, twofold. One is ability to bring stuff live, so to influence people around you, to actually deal with projects, with product, with other stakeholders, to break down complexity. I mean, some of this is experience with the stack, to be more familiar, also with stakeholders, with the product managers that you're working with. The other part is also some life experience, some seeing failures, seeing anti-patterns, working in multiple companies to see how this was done. And it's of course very hard to gain in one coherent traction. This is often what you gain also by hiring a senior developer from another company. They know how a failing company also looks like. They know how to influence someone, how to nudge, or how to get, sometimes there's also political aspects of bringing something live. I mean, it sounds, it's politically incorrect to say this, but often it's not about being right, but it's convincing others to do what is right. What they might not think that is right, but to influence, to gain enough momentum, to also have this right feeling when to go for, I don't know, technical depth versus a bigger feature, when to say no. And this is hard to define leadership and seniority that you gain somewhat naturally as you see more, as you age, and as you bring more gray hair, more experience to the table. Yeah, but it's very hard to accelerate. It's very hard to bring this into. I mean, it's like this in all of life, right? It's very hard to be a 30-year-old CEO who is as experienced as a 50-year-old CEO. And then we have it in developers.
Well, I agree with your this opinion. So this is more than technological knowing that it's also about your life experience. That's for sure. Can you also share a little bit? You would be surprised. You said that everybody uses OKR methodology, but I'm coming in the end of February to Moscow. There would be a conference for big companies, banks, fintech conference, and there would be a segment, a lot of talks about OKR and how to use it, how to use this framework. Can you share a little bit with us? What is it? How you implement it? How is it help to you?
Yeah, what I said is not that everybody uses OKR, but they use it the same way that everybody uses Scrum. So when sometimes the companies are already doing this, because the idea is not that it's not rocket science. Also, OKR is not rocket science. The important part is often that you have a process that forces critical stakeholders to figure out what is it actually that they want. So in OKR, this starts from the CEO downwards. There's no way to hide it. You need to define what you want, what you care about, and also put it in a not so fluffy way. So, and this is non-negotiable in the OKR framework. So you need to put down the 2, 3 metrics that you truly want to change. And actually write them down in key results, like a number of customers, or sometimes it's less obvious things like organizational achievements. Hire a certain number of people, bring in more stability, increase customer happiness. And this is also a healthy feedback loop that we saw here in Comtravo. So actually, not just having this fluffy, I yell into a room or I say something in the audience meetings, guys, this is what should improve. No, you write down what you care about, and then you also make everybody else think how they contribute. This forces also very honest and open discussions. And then comes the hard part, because then, from my experience, there are 2 flavors of OKR. So one is where you start using this as an actual performance measuring mechanism, where you really derive like typical quarterly goals that you have as an individual. You start having this hard quarterly achievements that everybody now needs to derive from OKR. The other flavor would be that you treat it more like a political message, like in the sense of, guys, our NPS is currently here. We need to bring it up. Think, drive what you can to achieve this. And both can be very successful. We also experimenting with both. What is not so advisable from my experience is if you start mixing this. And the important distinction is not everybody can obviously contribute to every OKR. So, for example, in our case, it's often the finance team or the infrastructure team or the HR team or the office management who have a tough time having this one-step connection to the actual company goals. By definition, they're there to support the company and make it successful and influence things. But if you are too technical about this, I mean, of course, everybody can contribute or can form a line of reasoning how they contribute. But for some roles in the company, this line of reasoning is quite long and quite arbitrary. And then you lose this this political message, this propaganda. I mean, of course, I don't know, in a big company, arbitrary example, you have a person who takes care of the snack bar. Of course, you can now write down how the guy who fills up the snack bar and the Club Mate contributes to the number of sales that you do. But this also convolutes easily the message. So from my experience, what is the easiest approach is if you treat this as a shorthand for the company roadmap, for propaganda mechanism, in a positive sense. This is what we want to achieve. This is where we are not good. These are the metrics that we want to drive. And then also influence your key stakeholders and your key driving departments that actually can contribute to these metrics like this. In our case, for example, it's sales department, it's product engineering department, also operational department. So this is how you, guys, our customer happiness is not ideal. Think how to improve it. And by the end of the quarter, I would like to see this improvement in NPS, this improvement in new contracts signed.
I see. And actually, so how you actually manage this framework with your team? You have 50 team members, and do you speak with everyone, or is it something like huge meetings, or how does it work?
Now, specific for product engineering, data science, this is a hard question, because on the one hand, OKR, I mean the ideology behind OKR, as I understand it, I'm not an expert, is that everybody, really literally everybody in your organization should be able to take these metrics and think how they can contribute, and then are able to come up with a plan how they individually can contribute. This is not always how organizations function, because more often than not, you have a roadmap, a quarterly plan, what to achieve. So what we decided also is we are driving the roadmaps by OKR, but it's hard to do a roadmap planning with 50 people. So we do this in a smaller amount. So we, in the end, POs sit with their teams and think, what is achievable? How does this drive? And of course, not everything on the roadmap is directly related to key results that you actually care about. And you have these two things like technical debt, stability, quality, not that you also care about, but they are not key results. But the interesting part is then also these discussions around this, where you use the OKR as a guiding star to come up with decisions that you take.
That sounds logical to divide this huge task of speaking with 50 guys to smaller teams, and then maybe they're some kind of someone like team leads would speak with you or with each other or together to find some solution how to achieve those goals.
And the hard part is then, of course, on projects that don't map well into this team setup. So also discussion is of course easy on the product ownership level, where you have this typical team PO team setup that cares about a portion of your stack, of your product. This is also where, for example, Agile really works well, where you come together and as a team decide how can we improve our flight search in our case, or our supply integrations, or this smaller metrics. The hard part is then when you have bigger strategic projects that are less obvious and maybe even don't fit into a quarter or don't fit this, and have work on different timelines, don't have an immediate impact on these things, but you still need to do them, and you are convinced. This is then often also a leadership question, where you need to do we need to break this down and convince your POs to properly bring this to the teams.
Yeah, sometimes it should work like that. Sure. Yeah. What do you do actually? I mean, even if you work within this OKR and within Scrum, and if you do everything right, everyone happy. There are a lot of times, I guess, when some goals are not being achieved. Something goes wrong. Something's changed, and how often does it happen, and how do you deal with such a things? Because you're somehow responsible before that. In front of stakeholders, and this is a
of course it happens all the time because predicting the future is impossible. What is it? I mean, it depends on what level you deal with or you care about. But in the end, the way to deal with planning versus reality is often very similar. It's you do a post-mortem, or you do a retrospective on what you planned and what you actually achieved, and then you evaluate, is there a gap? Why is there a gap? What assumptions went into the planning? And this thinking framework, or this framework of handling this, works the same on the sprint review versus incident, post-mortem on incidents versus a quarterly evaluation. So this is also where you have to have a culture, or where my contribution to this is to guide people not to spin this in a negative direction. So because it's very easy to look at your quarterly goals and just we only managed to achieve 4 out of 6 epics that we wanted to deliver, and sorry, we failed as a company, and now we do it next quarter. Whereas in reality, you might have planned, you would have been happy already with 3 out of 4 epics, and you delivered 4, and this is where you need to get the messaging right. And where you also need to be able to learn and to optimize your planning. And the best way to learn from this as an institution, as a company, is to then revisit. Why did we plan this? What went well? What went wrong? What were the assumptions? Which assumptions turned out to be right or wrong? Why did the wrong ones were the wrong? And then try to learn from this. Hopefully in a non-blaming way. But of course, the one important aspect is also not to let it slide too much. So you need to find the right balance between a dictatorship where everybody is whipped all the time, and just a laissez-faire meritocracy where everybody just feels like, yeah, let's see what we can achieve. Because sometimes you have these strategic milestones that must be achieved. So sometimes they're imposed from external, like when you integrate a new supplier or need to achieve compliance with certain laws or whatever. So you have these external boundaries, they're very obvious. I don't know, last big one here in Europe was this strong customer authentication, a big law that went live that changed the whole payment processing systems. Yeah, you need to bring it live, point. There is no self-discovery trip. But sometimes it's also important business goals. I mean, from startup perspective, when you're running on a burn rate, you need to have achieved certain things. Otherwise, you are in big trouble. And it's nice to die a beautiful death, but best to avoid this. And this is where you need to find also the right balance between communication. This is then really a leadership question. To sometimes you need to have a strong message, but you can't have this strong message every week. You have the nuclear option that you can apply maybe once per quarter, where you have an all-hands meeting with slightly different messaging. Yeah.
So actually, different departments in your company they work together, trying to listen to each other when goals are planning. I'm not talking about this external goals. Yes. So it happens sometimes when stakeholders are strongly says do that, or maybe marketing department says do this, do that stuff. It would be easier for us to sell, or they listen to your technical department.
Yeah, well, in our case, we start at some point building up a product team, and this is one of the core responsibilities of a product team, also to distill these different sources of knowledge, like customer, departments, key stakeholders, and try to find a compromise that works. It depends a bit on what setup you have, but of course, when you're very small, it's slightly different. It's a bit more chaotic. So in the early days, it was also much more, undiplomatic and but also quick. And then the advantage is you talk in the afternoon, and then at night you build it. In the morning, production is broken, and next day you fix it. But 2 days later, you have a stable setup with big feature life. And of course, when you're slightly bigger, this becomes more of a stable process, where essentially product starts talking to customers, starts doing some market research. And this is valuable because also the more mature your company, also the more sources of data do we have. So we have a lot of customers by now, and of course with a lot of customers you have a lot of different voices. Every customer would like to see a slightly different feature next, or a slightly different trade-off for us to make. And then you need to balance what data you have, where you're also convinced that it's the right decision, that fits nicely with the strategic plan of the company, and then need to distill this into strategy, tactics, messaging towards the company, and then the trick is to make them also work aligned to this, without this being obviously that everybody needs to do this, this, and this. So making this a bunch of features that everybody is just working on, but giving enough degrees of freedom so that you also have involvement in the teams. So I know example would be, in our case, it was mobile readiness of the product. At some point, we got much stronger feedback from everybody that it would be nice if it worked on an iPad. It would be nice if it worked even on the phone. And then there's a strong feedback, but then you just give it to the teams to make something out of this. So it's not a micromanaging task then to write down specific things, but you give ownership of this to the team to execute.
How is it possible for your team to continue in this constant fight with the world while creating all the software? I mean, how they are not burned out? They maintain somehow their work-life balance? Also, this is a question to you. It's a tough job to distill all this stuff and to organize all these things.
There's actually an important aspect that is rarely, it's often a taboo, this burnout, because it sounds very harsh, but it's for example, one thing that we discovered early on, that you have to, for example, when we started working in Kanban, and it's easy for teams to burn out in Kanban, because Kanban, you just constantly deliver, and there's always a stream of stuff, and you need to create this perspective on what you actually achieved. You need to take one step back and say, guys, look, in the last 2 months, we actually brought 2 major things live, and this is how it impacted our customers. This is how it helped driving these metrics. That's one thing. I mean, so giving perspective, this fits also nicely with OKR and with frameworks that make you essentially do this. So to take a step back, to measure to define what you want to achieve, and then also give the team a perspective how they impact the business. Yeah, then of course the other important aspect is to give enough ownership to the teams. So really to find the right balance of what you truly care about versus what is degrees of freedom. So often it's in design, yeah, you care about certain things, but yes, I have an opinion as a CTO about the colors and buttons, and I have some aesthetics, although limited, but indeed, I don't care. This is not a fight that I pick. And this also translates into all kinds of other aspects, like how certain features are actually done, delivered, what micro decisions are taken by the teams. And then another thing is balance of, or another factor of potential burnout or bore out of teams is also right balance between technical depth and features. There's really a critical balance that you have to achieve, because you want people to care about, and the right developers or a healthy team cares about their Angular version. You can't tell them not to upgrade this. They will either do it hidden or they will do it officially. But best case is when it feels like a common thing. Yeah, of course you want to increase maintainability. Of course you want to do this. And sometimes it's also slightly political, because yes, even as a CTO, you don't care about all of this in all its glory. And sometimes you wonder, why the hell did they start this? Important point is to find this right, healthy balance in improving the stack and fixing technical debt and making everybody's life easier, and also everybody's CVs more interesting, versus actually achieving company goals.
Well, I see. So if to summarize almost in the end of our conversation within our time limit, So I guess if to summarize, somehow you have found, or you're still searching this balance between the goals of the organization and between personal goals of the team members, and the balance is somehow the key term of all your judgments, if it is the correct word, of all your statements. So I think you're for me this is quite healthy opinion to always try to find some balances and to work as a team.
Yes. Yeah, the trick is, of course, to realize that a lot of things are a function of your state of your company, so of the size of the organization, of maturity, of product market success. There's a reason why organizations with 5,000 people behave completely differently than organizations with 50 people. These are it's very easy as a startup to point, I know, to IBM and say, they are doing this process, but the process is there for a reason. It's a stabilization pattern in organization, and if they didn't have this, they would die. And you have all kinds of degrees of having a chaotic 5-person startup that just does what it wants, to, I don't know, 10 people, to 50, to 500. And the trick is really to find the right pragmatic approach on every stage in its cycle.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It is a lot about the psychology of the employees and also the stakeholders and C-level management people. Well, Marko, it was really interesting. I'll stop recording